Hello and welcome back to YouDecide2007. We're YouDecide, and at the moment we're going to do a bit of reporting. We're going to look at the arts policy, and we're also going to look at the education policies of the party. And Vivian, you're a specialist in arts, so can you give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, well, the education policy that was launched by Peter Garrett at the Himsa House yesterday in Brisbane is basically, in a word, very good. I think everyone in the arts sector will welcome it with open arms. It's clearly been written by somebody who's worked in the field and by someone who spent a lot of time in the field doing consultation. Among other things, he launched a policy of Art Start, which basically formalises the dole for artists. Particularly because people who work in the arts, when they seek art jobs,
well, hang on, the dole for artists. You're suggesting artists don't work. It's not a real job.
No, absolutely not. I'm just saying that this policy acknowledges that because of the nature of the arts industry in Australia, it's almost impossible to stay 100% in work.
So is this maybe the equivalent of drought assistance for farmers?
Almost. It really just brings Australian policy in line with European policy, I think, which is a great thing for the arts because, you know, of course we have a long history of having a cultural cringe and not valuing it as an industry.
Okay, so dole for artists. What else was in the policy?
10 million for the Australia Council for the Arts.
A financially conservative 10 million?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
not too conservative because this is arts policy.
Absolutely.
So how do they approach new media?
Which is a big one because one of the big things that the Liberal Party has done over the last few years is can the entire new media board. They've promised 17 million for a new media hub. I did ask Peter what exactly that meant and I didn't get a response, but it is mainly a commitment to a field that the Liberals have specifically canned entirely by cancelling that board.
Because it seems to me that actually the whole of the government doesn't get it in terms of broadband and in terms of new media, when they just do not understand how critical it is, not just in terms of the economy, but in terms of the social dimension. And I think, you know, what I hear you saying is that it's actually...
Of course, we should point out we do get an ARC grant to do this, so they're not entirely unaware of the...
The ARC, of course, is, as you know, is at arm's length from government.
Well, and most of these things should be too. And talking about arm's length, one of the people with the longest arms in politics is Peter Garrett. How's he going in his portfolio?
Yeah, well, it was really interesting watching him yesterday because he was, as we've said, among a very friendly little crowd there. But even then, he really performs the role of the politician. He's not quite comfortable there, and you kind of feel sorry for him because... So
this is the performer being the performer.
Well, no, because, I mean, obviously, if he lets go and if he's Peter Garrett being Peter Garrett, he'll come out with something like, oh, yeah, we can just go into Parliament and repeal the policy.
Change it.
Yeah, you know, he'll say what he'd just say, which is be a funny man. But instead, he has to do this thing of towing the line, and he hasn't spent years and years on the backbench, and he hasn't spent years in Young Labour.
Do you think he's misplaced? Do you think he's misplaced as a politician? I mean, should he just, you know, go and join U2 or something?
No, I think you know, there is almost a little bit of pathos in it that people can see and can feel, you know, well, at least he's not a scumbag. But yeah, but it does definitely appear that that there was a mistake made in giving him the environment.
Okay, well, why don't we move on to education, because important as the arts is, education keeps coming up in our surveys as being the #2 issue.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because at different periods in your life, there's a different part of the education system that you interact with, and that there's a lot of parents and there's a lot of students out there, and there's a lot of parents of students, and they're all interested in education. I think it also is important because the Labor Party wants to push it as an issue because it actually helps their case. And you might notice every time they talk about the economy, their answer to how they're going to keep inflation under control is the education revolution, which always makes me wonder what an education revolution is. Jason, you're in the education area.
I think this is all about, you know, I mean, I suppose we're talking about what was unveiled at the launch yesterday, and this is all about the ALP really trying to, you know, bind this into a narrative where they're really different to the government and they're oriented to the future. They tied it into the broadband, you know, infrastructure that they're going to do, and if you really want any point of ideological difference in this election, I suppose it would be education.
But is it a revolution or is it an increment? Is it the education increment?
Well, look, I think the difference between the two parties in education is that the Liberals don't believe it and the Labor Party do. I mean, the sort of sway that the Liberal Party have cut through, particularly, say, higher education in the past decade, again, they clearly don't understand the role that research and development plays as the engine room of a services-based and a knowledge-based economy. I mean, they just don't
Is it
get
they don't believe in education, or is it they've got a different view of it? Is it that it's more formalist and outcomes-based?
No, I just don't think they get it. I honestly don't.
Because there's a lot of self-made people in the Liberal Party. People who wouldn't be where they are without education.
They're self-made people, and they didn't do a very good job of making themselves, did they?
I mean, a lot of this stuff that the ALP's announced is actually on the margins, you know, in the grand scheme of things. But in some ways, politically, this is straight out of the Blair or the Clinton kind of playbook, isn't it? Education means the future. Education is something that the ALP owns, as you might put it.
Except that when you look at the Blair playbook, a lot of it's about accountability and measuring. And the Howard government's actually done a lot in the secondary school area about measuring and about accountability. You've got ACER doing a lot more testing than they were. They've also, Blair's about giving people, don't know that they've got vouchers there, but it's sort of giving a bit more competition in the system. You've almost got a voucher system now under Howard.
But the problem is that Howard's combining that with what has been, I mean, whatever your politics, objectively, a kind of disinvestment in real terms in education over a longer period. And Blair combine some of that kind of 3 R's rhetoric with an actual overall increase in the investment that the UK was making. In
carrots and sticks in the British system. I mean, things like the research quality framework in higher education are a complete disaster area, I think. It's supposed to be about metrics and measurement and all that stuff. I don't think it's going to fly at all. Just going back to your point about Labor and education, I mean, the Labor Party has always taken the view that education is the machinery of social mobility. That's how people aspire to the sorts of values that, or the sorts of things that, you know, that Howard says we should be about.
Yep. Okay. Well, we might call it there, and we'll be back after the break to look at the polls and also to have a look at the launches of the political party campaigns. Although you'd think it's a little bit late in the evening to be launching your campaign 1.5 weeks out.